Graylog is on a mission to make threat detection and incident response easier, faster, and more affordable. They help cybersecurity teams reduce risk across attack surfaces with SIM, log management, and API security solutions. Their newest offering, Graylog API Security, adds a new layer of defense by discovering rogue APIs, monitoring for threats from inside the perimeter, and providing detailed guided responses. Full fidelity capture of API requests and responses ensures you can perform complete investigations and meet regulatory requirements. Some popular and persistent API myths have almost become threats themselves. Go to securityweekly.com/Graylog and watch the video there to debunk the top 5 misconceptions surrounding API security.
Welcome to RSA Conference 2024. We're recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. This interview is sponsored by SailPoint. I'm your host, Mandy Logan, and joining me today is Wendy Wu, Chief Marketing Officer at SailPoint. Wendy.
Mandy, nice to meet you.
You as well. I'm so glad you're able to join us on this a little bit calmer day. The last day of RSA, much easier day, I feel like.
Much easier going, definitely. Yeah.
It is. I'm very happy you joined us. And I want to start right off the bat. Why does identity security matter?
Yeah, identity security as a concept actually has evolved from a dozen years ago, let's say. When it started as a concept, it actually was mainly a back office technology support.
True.
Consider about access provisioning, giving someone access to certain applications, right? But then as time goes, we realize there is actually a very important security angle that identity plays. So, like in today's environment, we are seeing a tremendous amount of cyber risks happening, attacks. The volume, the complexity, and the frequency that happens, it's just increasing day by day. We have seen the data from IDSA, Identity Defined Security Alliance, that they did a survey last year. Across all the companies they surveyed, 90% of them experienced at least one identity-related breaches. 90% of them. So that's just a tremendous amount, which tells us identity is so critical. It's no longer just a back office technology support function, right? It's actually at the center of how we think about protecting our business, increasing the security posture for our enterprise environment. In addition, think about during COVID times, right? While COVID has gone behind us now, it did leave us with something, which is the operation from anywhere standard,
Absolutely.
which is now a new requirement. We need to empower our people to work and operate from anywhere on any devices. And that put a very tight requirement on how do you make sure while they have access, their access secure. And that goes back to the identity needs that we're all talking about. And IT as a function itself, it's evolving very fast. We want to make sure IT is set up successfully so they have tools to manage all these access needs and requests in a very efficient while very secure way. So that's why identity security is now coming to the forefront about how we ensure enterprise is secure.
It's huge. It's such a massive undertaking. And with the flexibility and variability and the additional tools that are added day by day for most organizations, it shocks me to think of how security teams and security leadership can really focus and go, yeah, this is exactly where we need to zero in. Do you have any reports or data that SailPoint has found very helpful in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we embark on this journey, right, really trying to understand how identity security helped the whole industry move forward, we started with asking ourselves, how mature is the industry today?
Okay.
Exactly, where are we? So for the past 2 years, we partnered with McKinsey and did the Horizons of Identity Maturity Assessment just to see how overall the enterprise is secure. We surveyed 350 identities leaders globally.
Okay.
And for each year, we map out the maturity of the companies based on, do you have identity security strategy? Do you have the operating model? Do you have the right technologies? And do you have the talent to support your business? Based on how the participants answered those questions, we charted their maturity on a 1 to 5 scale.
Okay.
Horizon 1 is the least advanced. Horizon 5 is the most advanced. And, Horizon 2, it's where people started to deploy some technology, but it's very fragmented, very manual. Horizon 3, it's where business started to really scale up and digitize their identity practice. And they're starting to use some modern technologies like AI, ML to automate some manual processes. When you get to Horizon 4, it's massive use of AI, identity become a digital transformation enabler for the whole business. So based on that, today we can see 44% of the whole enterprise, it's on Horizon 1.
I believe it. I actually thought it might be higher, but yes.
Almost half of them are just at the very beginning without nothing, without anything meaningful.
Right.
And then there are about 29% of the business that's on Horizon 3, right? So
Really?
less than a third. Yeah. And those get into Horizon 4 and 5 are really single digit. 6 or 7% altogether. That just tells us the industry is still not very mature, but it also means huge opportunity for us to really come up with the right solutions to help the industry move forward, because it's just so tremendously important.
So with that in the report, I'm honestly kind of surprised that any that you surveyed were at Horizon 5 already. But was there information taken from that either externally you thought, wow, their posture was incredibly good, and then how does SailPoint's approach help, or how does it change what most organizations have been doing traditionally?
Yeah, so we actually also mapped our SailPoint customers data
Okay.
based on this maturity model, and we can see almost 2/3 of our customers are Horizon 3 and beyond.
Oh, nice.
Right,
Okay.
which just tells us we do help them overcome lots of challenges that the companies at Horizon 1 are still dealing with, so that they can scale up their practice and automate that. So coming to what is SailPoint trying to do, our vision is really to help enterprise manage and secure the access to their critical data and application for every identity in their environment. And the way we do that is through our unified platform, Alice, right? Which we take a unified approach to help them manage all the different identity types, and not only look at their employee identity, but we look across their non-employees. We look at their machines, and we look at their privileged access, all built upon a unified architecture model, unified data layer. That way they get a single view of all the identities in their environment, and that allow them to make meaningful decisions. And all of this is also powered by our AI and ML model, so that they can automate lots of the manual processes that's just humanly impossible these days.
Absolutely. I mean, on that, you shared with me earlier a statistic about the absolute requirement we have for automation on identity security. Will you share that now?
The
It was about just how many, by the time you have the identity access points, or the places that identity does need to be verified, it grows so exponentially as soon as one tool or anything else is added.
So let's take a typical enterprise, for example, right? Within this enterprise, there are lots of different identities. Let's say there is 100,000 identity types. That's not just employees.
Right.
And there's all the machines, that all the contractors, suppliers, partners, and service accounts, let's say. Altogether, that's 100,000. And they have 2,000 applications. For each application, there will be different entitlements based on the role you have. Like the CEO's entitlements will be different from an admin's, right? So those will be very different entitlements. Let's say each application will have 100 entitlements. So can you guess how many variations of entitlements we're talking about here?
It's millions?
It's a math.
It's huge.
It's huge, right? So when you multiply those numbers together, you come back with 20 billion. 20 billion variations. But that's not just the end of the story yet. You're here not only talking about application entitlements, there is also data entitlements. Means to say, like, who can have the certain data within the applications. That's just add on the complexity. And when an employee join a company or change the role or leave the company at each juncture point, those entitlements change again. So that we can be talking about trillions, quadrillions of variations of all the entitlements of access needs. And how can you do that in a manual way? You tell me, right? It's just
We can't.
impossible.
No, I'm sorry, Frank or Mary in the SOC or anybody who's in the IT doing the onboarding, there is no physical way that they can make sure every single point is secure. So, where with SailPoint, what is the coming focus?
Yeah, so come back to how do we solve this humanly impossible problem? We really need to leverage modern technology like the machine learning and AI as the foundation that will then help us gain the insights and automate the manual processes, right? And then put them on a single pane of glass where you get all the intelligence through the unified data layer. And that way, our customers will be armed with the right intelligence to make the right decision and minimize the risks for them. So, for example, we want to have role access intelligence. So that means how is each role using the access they have? Are they using it in the right way? Or are they not using it? If so, maybe we cut off that access. Business can save some money, right? And then based on the patterns, we can also detect outliers. If you're using this application in a way that's different from your peers, something might be going on. And then we can trigger the workflow to automate the process, to do certifications, to make sure you have the right behavior based on what your needs should be. So it's all coming down to who should have access to what when. And our job is to make sure you have a simplified way to manage such a complicated process with the solution that we provide.
And so, with that solution, I really want to go back to the point about the employee identities versus non employee identities. Will you speak a little bit more on that? And is there anything regarding the use of AI that helps with especially the non employee identities?
Yeah, so when it comes to non-employees, today I feel like it's just at the beginning of getting the attention of the enterprise space. When we traditionally for the past years, oftentimes our focus is on the workforce identity, employees primarily, right? And oftentimes non-employees are treated by the HR system. It's in a different system, but or it's managed in a spreadsheet. Oftentimes you don't even know who's the contractors out there who may still have access while they're no longer being on a contractor status with you anymore. So it's critical for business to bring that to the view together with the employees so that you have a single pane of glass. And actually we have some data points that shows 40% of those non-employees are not being managed.
Oh,
and
really?
each single point of not managed identity means what? It's vulnerability, right? Hackers may take advantage of that. And we've seen so many bad news happening these days that people take advantage of those non-employee identities to really hack into the system. And, then disaster happens, right? So we at SailPoint, this becomes a priority, and we have seen huge response from our customers when we release our non-employee risk management solution. Customers are really giving us very strong feedback. Yes, absolutely, they need to bring this in-house, and not just that, they want to manage that in the same system, on the same platform, together with their employees. Then you have much richer context of all of the usage, all of the access needs. That way you can ensure your security posture in a much more enhanced ways.
Okay, that is fantastic. And I want to go back to SailPoint's ability to help the security teams with rapidity of onboarding and offboarding.
So oftentimes we know when you hire a new employee, how do you decide what access they should have? The old way of doing that is they go to the manager and ask the manager, what access should this new hire have? The manager say, oh, I don't know, maybe just same as Joe, right? Because they're on the same team. But oftentimes that process, it's relying on very manual human inputs. It's not efficient, it's not accurate, and it may open up a risk potential for the potential hackers to deal with. So what we need to do is really establish a dynamic policy-based model based on the business context. At what time you should have what access. And for new hires, you can have that all configured from day one when you join the company. So it really smooths out employee experience tremendously. And this creates the frictionless experience without compromising the security that you need to bring to the business, right? Oftentimes, it's like two ends of the spectrum, being secure and being productive, being fast moving, being innovative. And we want to bring the two together and create a healthy balance between the two so that our company is secure while our employee experience it's oftentimes well maximized. At the same time, the security team or the IT team, their experience will also be largely enhanced because they don't have to deal with all the tickets that oftentimes
Exactly.
hit them, the help desk calls they're getting, right? So they can truly prioritize their time on more meaningful tasks to secure their business.
Wendy, thank you so much. That is really beautiful to hear about the efficiency and the increase in security posture. Thank you for sharing about identity security.
Thank you so much, Mandy.
So everyone, please, for more information, go to securityweekly.com/SailPoint RSAC. And for more information on all of our interviews, really, from RSA, go to securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thank you again, Wendy.
Thank you, Mandy.
Welcome back to RSA Conference 2024, Broadcast Alley in Moscow West. I am Jeff Mann, co-host of Paul's Security Weekly, and I am here talking to Andre Durand, who is the CEO of a company called Ping Identity. Andre, welcome.
It's great to be here, Jeff.
Andre, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, how you got here, being here at this kind of conference today, cybersecurity related.
Well, my journey here started in 2001. I was on a sailboat in the Caribbean and blogging for the first time, and made an observation that networking, pretty much everything is drawn to ever increasing levels of networking, and that all their utility, once you pulled them off the network, disappeared. And I made the jump that if that was the case, basically we should be able to have what now today is find my phone, find my computer.
Right.
Anything that connects to the network, we should see it. But then it occurred to me that we didn't have an identity on the internet. We were all dogs on the internet. And so it was a little bit of an aha moment that anything of value that touches the network, we better know who they are. And so came back a little bit early, raised money, and started Ping Identity.
So that's an interesting kind of concept. And if you don't mind, I'd like to drill down a little bit because we try to be an educational program, if nothing else. The idea of identity, could you unpack that a little bit? Is it important for people to know me, Jeff Mann, on the internet? Or is it more important for me to be a human being and everything that's on the internet associated with me is associated with me?
Yeah. So that latter part, 50 years into this journey of identity and the internet, that latter part is coming. So hold on to that.
Okay.
The current state of what I do, identity and access management, is we build the software that companies use to basically identify all of the humans that interact with them.
Okay.
Employees that interact with their IT systems, customers that interact with their websites and loyalty programs and things like that.
Gotcha.
So think your digital identity as managed by companies on your behalf to keep track of your interactions with them.
Okay.
There's a whole host of software, login systems, we call them authentication systems,
Right.
directories that store your identity profile information,
Right.
store your preferences, store your consent to share information,
Okay.
all the kind of systems and machinery
Which
to
certain
keep those
companies
accounts
sort
secure.
of reset periodically just for fun.
Just for fun.
But we won't
That's
go
right.
there. Okay. So I'm old school. I grew up a long time ago in the world of what we called at the time information security, where even before computers, there was an idea of authorization and authentication. Working for the military, it was, the person that's on the radio calling in the airstrike. How do we know that's really our guy calling in the airstrike and they're really giving us the grid coordinates for the bad guys and not our own troops type of
Right.
thing. So that's sort of the mentality that I grew up in this business with. Where along the lines did that concept transition to identity and access management?
It actually hasn't changed, to be honest with you. What old
Okay.
is new again. The way we serve up the capabilities that do what you're describing have shifted over time. It was those capabilities were consumed on-prem. Now they're consumed as SaaS services in the cloud. Some of the standards have shifted. Obviously, the things that we're protecting have shifted over
Sure.
time. Where they live has shifted. Some are on-prem, some are in the cloud. It's hybrid, it's multi-cloud.
There's kind of a few
But the basic
moving targets there.
But the basic concepts are still the same. So the identity piece of the equation, or the identity management piece of the equation, is you actually have to have an account on a system before you authenticate to that account.
Right.
So identity management is all of the stuff around creating an account, and then at times where that account information needs to be propagated to the other applications that you might use, because these are all separate siloed applications.
Right.
The identity management piece is we provision that account information out to all of the other applications that you might need to access.
Sure.
So that when you show up to authenticate, you actually have an account to authenticate to. So the identity management tier, I kind of think of it as the non-real-time side of identity.
Okay.
And the authentication is kind of the runtime. So when you show up and you want to do something, you authenticate through a login system. And then once you have a session or you've authenticated, then you're allowed to do things. The things that you're allowed to do is referred to as authorization.
Right.
So authentication is making sure that it's you.
Yep.
Authorization is then mapping it's you to what you're allowed to do. And different people are allowed to do different things based upon how risky is what you're attempting to do.
Right.
And based upon how much trust we have that the authentication actually got you right.
Gotcha. So, safe to assume that identity and access management plays with things like multi-factor authentication systems and the whole concept of, and again, sort of the old school concept of, in the beginning, there was the user ID and password.
Yeah.
Something that you knew.
Yep.
And then there was something that you had, and we're at RSA. Everybody remembers the RSA key fob if they're old enough. And then there was the biometrics, something you are. That's all something to do with, I guess, at least the front door, the authentication.
It does. So if you think about authentication as that front door metaphor into a session where you're then going to be asking to do things and permitted to do things or not.
Right.
The strength of the authentication is obviously very important. The problem with secrets is that they're phishable, they're stealable, essentially, and then you can replay them and no one's the wiser.
Yep.
And that's especially true in remote circumstances. You can steal a secret remotely and play it back remotely.
Sure.
Something that you either are or something that you have limits the attack surface then to a much smaller geography, physical space versus a virtual space.
Right.
So in the evolution of authentication, we've kind of gone from every application does its own authentication, and it's all a lot of weak doors is a way to think about it. Everyone has a password, but they're all phishable.
All screen doors.
So we'll centralize authentication and leverage open standards to do single sign-on, but we'll do multi-factor authentication to that central authentication authority. And multi-factor authentication, as you said, uses a variety of additional techniques to ensure the authenticity of the user behind the session.
And there's even been an evolution there that there's more things like, the fact that everybody's glued to a smartphone that's got GPS in it so they could track your movement.
That's correct. There's more
behavioral
and more techniques. There's more and more techniques. There's more and more signals that we have access to,
right,
which essentially allow us to map the level of assurance of the authentication and the authenticity of you. We have more signals, and that's referred to as multi-factor, if that makes sense. And we're leveraging all of those signals to ensure the integrity of the user.
So if I'm understanding correctly, and again, using sort of our, front door mentality and then where can you go type of thing, metaphor, once I get in the front door, you're reasonably sure I'm Jeff Mann. And so then it's a matter of what is Jeff Mann listed and authorized of being able to access.
Well, I'll go one step further than that.
Okay.
In old world thinking, there was like a gate to trust. You're untrusted, then you're trusted.
Right.
In new world thinking, zero trust, don't trust the user, the network, or the device by default.
Right.
There's also an element of the time continuum, the amount of time that you trust.
Okay.
So the notion that you would authenticate once and be in is not necessarily where we're going.
Okay.
It could be that we want to continuously authenticate.
Interesting.
So that the dimension of trust in time also shortens, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So you have an accounting role at a company, and you typically log in Monday morning, and you spend about 4 hours updating some report. You don't necessarily need to be doing it for 6 or 8 or 10 hours, and then again,
That's all
doing it
part
on
of
Wednesday
the
night.
recognition of your behavior, which is a
Okay.
pattern of authenticity.
Right.
And some behaviors look different than the way you normally behave, and that's a signal that can be leveraged to, in essence, ensure the integrity of an account.
Okay. So in today's modern world, with the technological advances that are out there and a certain theme of this conference, how is that impacting identity? I mean, how do you trust anything these days?
Well, it's harder and harder to trust anything, which is why the principles of zero trust become the centerpiece of the future of the cybersecurity principles. So don't trust the user, the network, or device by default. Verify always. And if you could afford to, verify continuously if you don't kill the user in the friction of doing so. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So we're trying to find the
There's a
sweet spot,
balance.
the balance, the intersection of what's enough security, and how can we deliver that security in a way that doesn't disrupt the user's flow, what they're actually trying to do. So can we make the security invisible? Passwordless is a form of stronger authentication because the methods, the non-phishable methods, can't be remotely stolen and replayed.
Right.
But it's actually a better user experience. We don't have to remember them. We don't have to type them in. So it's a great example of where we achieve a higher security construct and improve the user experience. And we're always looking for that. We're always looking for techniques that up the level of assurance, and reduce the friction at the same time.
So, and is that the essence of what Ping Identity is trying to do?
It's one of
these
many
days?
things we do. We've helped companies on that journey to centralize identity and access management, to centralize the way that the techniques that they use to authenticate users through multi-factor authentication, evolving that into adaptive authentication that says you don't have one bar for everyone. If they're doing low risk things, just let them in. If they're doing high risk things, then we want to adapt the level of authentication to meet the level of risk. So adaptive authentication.
Right.
To leveraging signals to do continuous authentication on the user's behalf behind the scenes without obstructing the user.
Right.
The authorization systems that then define the security policies of what users can access and under what conditions can they access it.
Right.
So all of those authorization systems. The systems that store your profile information in a secure way so that that can be retrieved and your preferences can be retrieved and tied to your account.
Right.
The ability for you to verify your real identity prior to authenticating, and all of the other constructs that go into delivering a secure identity and access management experience, and essentially connecting every user to every resource across a very complex, multi-generational IT landscape.
Now, the last couple of years with, COVID and everybody working from home, or more people working from home, was that a sweet spot for you guys? Were you ready to ramp up for that?
Well, it certainly accelerated. Many of our customers were actually in a good position prior to that. Many companies were caught. They were following a modern roadmap to secure identity. But there was a rush to put MFA on people accessing corporate systems from home. So I'd say there were two things that seemed to rush. One was VPNs. So let's get people on the network, because many of the security controls were tethered to the network,
Right.
which was proxied by physical security. So the network was inside the boundary of physical. You had to badge in and then gain access to the network. VPN was the virtual instance of that. And then put strong authentication on everything remotely. Those were the two things I think we saw just kind of an immediate rush towards. But any company that was moving towards the concept of zero trust, there's no difference between, there's no inside and outside.
Right.
You presume bad actors are on the inside. So when you presume that already, there's no inside and outside, trusted or untrusted. Everyone's untrusted by default.
Right.
You're in a much stronger position to deal with the sorts of realities and threats we're seeing.
Right. Well, we could talk all day, it seems like, on this topic, but our time is running out. I do want to thank you for being with us today and at least giving me the education and the background just to help make it all work in my head, old as it is. That's going to wrap us for this session. Andre Durand from Ping Identity. If you want to learn more about the company, go to securityweekly.com/Ping Identity RSAC. That's going to wrap. Thanks a lot, Andre.
Thank you, Jeff.
Welcome to the RSA Conference. We're here recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. I'm your host, Ben Carr, and joining me today is David Bradbury, Chief Security Officer at Okta. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah. How are you finding RSA so far?
Oh, I'm loving it. I'm loving the energy. I love the fact that there's just everybody's here this year, and it seems that we've just bounced back from COVID. Everybody's coming together. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot more vendors. It's really it seems a very vibrant conference this year. It doesn't feel crowded, but it does feel like there's a lot of people attending and a lot of interest in what's going on. Yeah, that's really good. So, maybe we can start off today. Can you discuss a little bit about today's threat landscape and where identity plays in that threat landscape?
Yeah, I mean, as Okta, we have a front row seat in the identity world. And so from our front row seat, we see many different types of identity-based attacks against our customers. And what we've seen in the last 12 months particularly has been a real shift in the battleground. And that shift has really moved from the traditional attacks against identity are very much in that pre-authentication world.
Sure.
We think about phishing attacks, adversary in the middle type attacks, and those still are very prevalent, but we've seen a real shift away from those and more into the post-authentication attack world. If you think about the recent Microsoft attacks, the attacks against MGM and Caesars last year, even the attack against Okta last year, what we're seeing is that the threat actors have figured out that it's too hard to go through the front door anymore. We've actually done a pretty good job, I think, as an industry of encouraging people to move down the multi-factor path, to move down the phishing-resistant FIDO path. And so when we've got such a strong front door, the easiest way to in is actually to not go through the front door at all. It's to target browsers, session tokens, steal those session tokens, load them up in your own browser, and access all of the applications that person's logged into. This idea of post-authentication attacks, whether it was targeting Okta last year and stealing session tokens from files that our customers had uploaded to customer support, whether it's the recent Microsoft incident where emails have been scoured to try and find the same session tokens that could be leveraged to access customer environments, this is where the battleground has shifted to. It's no longer just about pre-auth, it's about post-auth. And so that's where we're trying to think more strategically and bring more of a focus in the coming years as to how do we solve that as an industry, because that's a piece of the puzzle that I don't think we've focused enough upon.
Yeah, I think a lot of times from an industry side, I look at colleagues and peers, and sometimes we get locked into a little bit of a static analysis of what the threat is, right? And I think people need to realize that the threat is ever evolving and changing. And so you're exactly right. As we look at closing off, everybody's kind of deployed MFA at this point. I mean, there are still people out there, surprisingly, that haven't. But for the most part, I mean, I think that's a well-accepted technology. The attackers kind of look for what else can we go after and how can we make it easier for ourselves.
That's it. And attackers will always focus on what works. And sadly, what works right now is phishing still works. But instead of phishing, people from a password login perspective, we're seeing that people are being phished. They're being introduced into accessing malware, loading that up, and they're not stealing your credentials anymore. They're stealing your session tokens. And so that's an area we think really needs some focus.
Interesting. Okay. So one of the big themes I think at the conference this year seems to be AI, right? Like everybody's talking about AI. AI is the thing. So what about the influence of AI on the threat landscape and security? And then how is it really helping or hurting us? Like, where do you see the benefit and where do you see the negative from it?
It's just extraordinary being here at RSA to see how, in the space of just 12 months, we've seen AI move from just a few startups and maybe lots of marketing campaigns to now we're actually seeing it being implemented and being used. And we're seeing that as well in the big brands in the security industry as well. So it's fascinating to me to see how in such a short period of time, we've seen such huge adoption. And
Sure.
I really can't recall a time where we've seen something like this really take off. And so beyond the hype, I think it's really fascinating for me to see how we can start to introduce AI from a security perspective, well, to fight against AI from a threat actor perspective. Because already we're seeing a massive explosion in the frequency and the targeting of phishing attacks, which we're not going to attribute all to AI, but it definitely makes things easier.
Well, look, automation on the attacker side is just coming, right? And the emergence of AI kind of democratizes that ability for them to use kind of infrastructure and scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so when I think about the benefits of AI from a security perspective and particularly from an Okta perspective, I think of AI as being able to give us the benefit of 100 PhDs in mathematics, right? These statisticians who can pore across the huge data sets that we have and actually try to draw real insights from those that we can then use. And so from an AI perspective, we're trying to look at things from two different lenses. One of how do we use the huge analytical capability that ML models can give you, but secondly, we don't want to just spotlight problems. We want to be able to fix problems. And that's really where I think comes back to what I was mentioning before about where threat actors focus, where do we need to start shifting our focus as a company. And I think about sort of SaaS applications of 10 years ago. And even today, we think about a CISO who's buying a SaaS application, they expect to see a couple of key security features. They expect to see things like, well, single sign-on as an example, given, this is what we do. But you expect to see things like a RESTful API to get logs. You expect to be able to do some very basic things, and all SaaS vendors have really come to the table with that in the last decade.
There's the minimum bar.
But what have they done since then? Threat actors have moved into different parts, different attack paths, but we haven't seen a version 2 of what a SaaS application really should be. And there are a variety of standards that have come to the fore over the past few years, from CAPE, CAEP, the Continuous Access Evaluation Protocol, to even just single logout. The idea that we can, as an identity provider, just log you out of applications. We still don't see adoption of these types of frameworks from SaaS vendors. And it's been interesting as a CISO talking to some of the product managers at some of the SaaS companies that we deal with and saying, why haven't you adopted these things? And their answer has been, no one's asking for it. And
that's great.
That, I think, is just the craziest answer.
It really is.
And so part of what I'm trying to do with RSA and really tapping into my networks around the world is to try and encourage more CISOs to be having that conversation with their vendors of, you need to move to the next level of security. You need to make sure you're thinking about how do you protect session tokens. Depop has been around for more than 12 months now. Distributed proof of possession. That's a way that we can secure session tokens and stop people from stealing them. Now, Okta's can't do everything because we don't own Slack. We don't own Salesforce.
Sure.
Everyone's got to do their bit. And so that's what I think is going to be the interesting part over the next 12 months, is to see which SaaS vendors are really switched on to security and are really going to take that next big leap and actually close the door on threat actors who are targeting people through this.
Yeah, I think that's the job of every CISO, right? Is really to push our vendors, right? And say, look, we're expecting more out of you. We're expecting more value. We're expecting you to be forward thinking. We're expecting you to kind of think about security as the forefront of what you do. And it's kind of funny in the security space, sitting in an operator role for a long time, I'm always amazed when you talk to a security vendor and it doesn't seem like they're doing it right?
Yeah.
So, on kind of that line of topic, you mentioned kind of the issues that Okta has had over the last several months. I'm just wondering, can you talk at all about what is Okta doing to bolster its own security efforts? Any lessons learned, any takeaways from it that you're implementing and kind of moving forward is like a different way?
So one big area that I'm very strong on making sure that doesn't happen to us is, I don't want the Okta super admin to be the same as the Microsoft domain admin when it comes to us talking about attack paths and the crown jewels and how they can be abused. So a lot of energy has been poured in the last 6 months is really trying to look at the Okta super admin and making sure that we can do everything we can to disrupt any tactics that we've seen from threat actors that are focused on trying to get access to Okta. So we've analyzed every attack path from the MGM and Caesars attacks to a myriad of other attacks that have occurred against our customers over the past couple of years, trying to look at how can we disrupt every single one of those. And part of us downing tools on any feature development that's not security over the past 6 months has been to really focus in on this. And so just an example of an item here is just trying to bind your IP address that you're logging into as an admin to the session token that you've actually created, so that if somebody steals that session token, we immediately revoke your authentication. We immediately bounce you out. And we're evaluating that on every mouse click within the admin portal that we have on the Okta side. Again, it's small, but it's absolutely critical in disrupting the attack paths that we've seen. But from an internal perspective, I think the big lesson learned over the last couple of years for me is that when you're a critical infrastructure provider like Okta, we don't have the privilege of being able to think about our IT estate and have a risk-based management approach, right? Everything needs to be considered with the same threat model that we apply to the Okta production service. We need to make sure that if it's the paperclip ordering system, it's the lunch menu system, everything gets raised to the same high bar. And that's a lot of the work we've been doing over the past 6 months, has been ensuring that everything has been raised to the same high bar that we've had as the Okta service exists today.
Yeah, and look, I think that's a takeaway for anybody out there watching, right, who's running a security program, is to really sit and look and say, look, we have to analyze what our risks are and what our threat profile looks like, and how should we be actually addressing this, right? Like, yes, we all need to risk prioritize, and you've done that, but you've said essentially everything we need to be concerned about, right? We can't afford to do that because of the business we're in.
That's it.
Yeah, I think that's really great. How are you helping your customers, right? When you think about the rising threat and kind of helping them address it and meet it, like what's the focus moving forward from Okta in helping your customers?
So there's a couple of different priorities for us at the moment when it comes to how we think about customers and securing them moving forward. If I actually wind back the clock a little bit to the Twilio attacks that occurred back in August a couple of years ago. And I think that was a real big wake-up call for us at Okta as we were thinking about our product development. Of up until then, we'd been really focused on usability. How do we make passwordless a reality? How do we make sure that you log in once and you get access to everything and you never have to log in again?
Well, actually, user experience, right?
User experience, really focused on user experience. And that was a wake-up call for us with that incident of actually there are certain areas, there are certain applications, there are certain types of users where actually having a high friction user experience is actually beneficial. We actually want to make it hard for attackers to be able to get through. And so in the space of just 60 days after that incident, we launched a product on our side, which is the phishing resistant version of our software authenticator. So giving you the FIDO origin binding feature to really prevent a user from being able to be tricked into putting their credentials into a fake phishing site. And so we came to market with that nearly 2 years ago now. And looking at the uptake of phishing resistant technologies, whether that's YubiKeys and hardware authenticators or our own software based authenticator, we're seeing only 4% of authentications on our platform using phishing resistant tech. 96% of authentications on our platform today are phishable. And that's a choice. That's a choice for all of our customers to adopt these technologies. And again, I think we've come leaps and bounds in the last 2 years in making these things easier to deploy, easier to manage, easier to use. But we just haven't seen the adoption. Right, so part of the go forward for us
is that customers being uneducated, right, or not having the time. Like, I think about myself in CISO seat. Like, the larger the organization, the larger the team, the easier it is for you to become informed. But especially, like, there's a lot of small, medium businesses that are Okta customers. I'm sure.
Yeah,
they don't have the staff, they don't have the time, and I think misconfigurations or the inability to take advantage of features a lot are the reasons why things happen, which I think is what you're getting to. So, are you doing something specific to address that?
Yeah, so absolutely. We've taken a lot of feedback on board over the past couple of years, and I think a lot of people have formed very strong opinions over that period of it's too hard, it's too cumbersome, it's just too much of an inconvenience, it's too hard to manage, and so the excuses have come through thick and fast, and we've done something about that. We've now made it so easy to deploy, so easy to use.
How easy is it?
Well, I'm telling you, I'm using it every day. And so what part of the message here is that as the go forward and we think about what can we be doing for customers, it's really to take that message out of things have improved. It's not the clunkiness of what a hardware authenticator might have been difficult to deploy 5-6 years ago. This is easy now. We've made it easy. And so when we see that there are attack vectors that have good solutions, they're there, they exist, and they're now at a level of maturity where we think that people should be adopting them en masse. But it's very interesting to see the Scattered Spider, the threat group, who's really focused on Okta. And they were responsible for the Twilio attack, and we've seen attribution to them for the MGM and Caesars attacks and others. But we think about how they've been focused on us, and we've looked at customers that have been impacted and looked at how much they've adopted these types of technologies after being impacted. And there's a huge uptick. You know, we see that once customers actually are impacted with a severe phishing attack, they quickly adopt these technologies. But we don't want that to be the track record for all of our customers moving forward. So a big focus for us in the next 12 months is to really raise the idea that phishing-resistant tech has now reached a level of maturity and ease of use and deployment. It's time to adopt it at scale. So that's sort of part one of what we're thinking about for the year ahead is let's make sure that where we have solutions, we actually make sure that people are adopting them. Secondly, we need to make sure that we're one step ahead of threat actors when it comes to attack paths against our customers. I think thinking about how the MGM and Caesars attacks played out, this was an example where threat actors were leveraging legitimate features of the Okta platform, particularly the ones we make available for M&A, where an acquired company has its own identity provider, links that up to their parent company. That idea was taken advantage of by threat actors, by Scattered Spider specifically, by standing up their own identity provider as a fake subsidiary and attaching that to the parent company. And by doing so, obtaining further and deeper access. And so we need to think more about how can the features of our platform be abused, and how do we make sure that we don't enable everything the moment that you sign up, that we give you the features you need, and we make sure that it's harder for attackers to be able to abuse the platform. So platform abuse is a really big focus for us, and we'll be dropping some different changes and features in and around that sort of protection area over the next few months. But again, we don't want to make that a burden for customers. For us, the future of security and secure by design principles means we've got to put this stuff in by default. And so we're rolling this through gently as we move forward, but that's a big focus for us this year as well.
Dave, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming out and talking with us today, and I look forward to seeing what Okta has to bring to us to the future. You're certainly an important part of the industry. Thank you for joining Security Weekly. Visit securityweekly.com/Okta RSAC to find out more. Check out all of our RSA coverage at securityweekly.com/RAC. I'm Ben Carr. Thank you.